Hey, Uncle Dan.
Hello.
Ting.
Was that the? Are you trying out for the Boston Philharmonic?
I am, and much like beloved television character brought to life by Martin Short, Ed Grimley, I play the triangle.
God, this is retro Wednesday.
It
for
is
us.
so retro Wednesday. Like, yeah, it's amazing. We should be recording this on reel-to-reel tape.
You could buy any listener not born before 1990. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Show ain't for you.
So, I play the triangle not so much because I enjoy that one particular pitch it gives at just the right moment during the symphony, but also because I'm an enthusiast for that shape.
Sure.
I do care for triangles.
A try. Yeah, I guess I was trying to trilinear. Is that a word?
It is now.
It's a pleasing one.
Yeah, it's a pleasing. Doug, what kind of shape are you enthusiastic about?
Well, I'm not enthusiastic about my shape, which could be described as rhomboidal at this point of quarantine. But,
I'm all the way to a COVID dodecahedron at this point.
Covahedron.
Yeah, I'm a new shape yet to be named.
Yeah.
In the last segment we talked about a whole bunch of things that were big deals back in the past, and when we were kids, just seemed like the biggest deals that have gone the way of the dodo for one reason or another. And amongst that list of things Uncle Mark thought would be bigger parts of his life in the future was the Bermuda Triangle.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
By the way, just so that you know, I'm going to do that skunt dun dun every time you say the phrase.
Oh, dude. Okay, let me go and hunt and kill Bermuda Triangle out of this document. When I was a kid...
or you can just call it the BT, which is how we talk about it around the How to Heretic studio.
Because we're hip like that.
Yeah.
When I was young, the BT was not a legend or a myth. It was stone cold fact.
Yep.
It was
we all knew that.
Yeah, it was undeniable. There was a region of the ocean that basically gobbled up anybody foolish enough to enter its troubled waters. And for all the reasons,
airspace.
Exactly. For all the reasons that Uncle Mark discussed in the last segment, this was a crazy, credulous time.
Yeah.
So I can be forgiven because I was a child and the world was full of possibilities, even if some of those possibilities were dark and dangerous. There were myriad TV shows, books and magazines and articles about planes, ships, and even whole naval wings disappearing without a trace or suffering some mysterious, inexplicable calamity upon entering the triangle.
Yeah.
And being a child, my grasp of geography wasn't, shall we say, robust. So I assumed that the Bermuda Triangle was some far-flung, rocky, and dark shoal that navigators only entered out of desperation or error.
Some Arctic sea, right?
Yeah, somewhere off in the mysterious east.
Yeah.
At which point their survival rate dropped to 0.
Yeah.
So the truth is, of course, that most, not all, proponents of the Bermuda Triangle claim that it is it exists in one of the busiest waterways in the world.
Yeah.
By nearly every account, the triangle stretches from Miami to either Vieques or San Juan, Puerto Rico, depending on who you're talking to, and then, of course, up to Bermuda and then back to Miami. If you go to Google Earth and draw this triangle, you will see what I'm talking about. Not only is the area a mere 455,000 square miles,
Oh my God.
or 1.179 million square kilometers for our listeners in the Commonwealth, but it sits at the nexus of all trade going through the Panama Canal and all trade coming from the Mississippi River.
Wow.
Right.
And it covers some of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. So this is a busy spot in the world as far as shipping and air traffic. So the volume of fishing vessels, yachts, cargo ships, cruise ships, military vessels, and commercial and military aircraft that traverse the Bermuda Triangle on a daily basis is staggering. The funny thing is, I have given the Bermuda Triangle so little thought over the last several decades that I had long forgotten the size and scale of it. Indeed, as we'll discuss, if you're going to choose a stretch of the ocean to try and turn it into some kind of There Be Dragons death trap, there may be no more self-defeating choice than the Bermuda Triangle. But in any case, for a few years there, based on pop culture at the time, I and many others would double-check each time the family trundled off to Bear Lake or Las Vegas just to be sure we didn't veer into the triangle and vanish off the face of the earth.
That's wise.
Yeah.
You got to be safe.
Exactly. I remember vaguely when I was very young, Uncle Mark, my dad, and one of my other brothers took a vacation to Bermuda itself.
Yeah.
And I was filled with dread that they would return safely.
Yeah.
My worst fears, of course,
that
were
was
realized.
my first airplane ride ever. And my dad, and I was 11, and it was the height of BT fever in America. And I was exhilarated and terrified.
Yeah. And of course, they did return safely, so my worst fears were realized. As we'll talk about, there were a handful of mysterious accidents off the Florida coast in the 1940s, all of them fully explicable, but taken together, it was definitely conspiracy fodder. As early as the 1950s, or actually 1950, articles began to appear in the Miami Herald and Fate magazine, laying out the most popular geography for the triangle and trying to wend some thread through these unrelated incidents and intimate it's something nefarious or evil. More and more articles appeared, trying to include incidents that didn't happen in the actual triangle, but were somehow related to it. So ships
triangle adjacent, it's terrifying.
Exactly. And ships and planes that passed uneventfully through the triangle but sank later, or ships and planes that were going to pass through the triangle but sank or crashed before they got there, were now included in the growing conspiracy. In 1964, an author for the pulp magazine Argosy was the first to name it when he titled his article "The Deadly Bermuda Triangle."
What year was that?
1964. Here, Dan, you can do it now.
Oh, so do it again.
The Deadly Bermuda Triangle.
Skun dun dun.
Perfect. Pitch perfect. We are professionals. So the name was a hit. In the next decade or so, book after book hit the market. And as far as I can tell, this may be the whole impetus behind the legend of the Bermuda Triangle. Just a few schlocky authors trying to make a buck.
Huh.
Yeah.
There's nothing to this in such a way that, as far as real world consequences go, the legend of the Bermuda Triangle took no purchase in the world. Lloyd's of London, for example, has never advised its ships to avoid the triangle and has never charged higher insurance rates to pass through the triangle. This is true of every shipping company and insurance broker in history. The U.S. Coast Guard has never once issued an advisory to avoid the triangle, except, of course, when there is a hurricane in the area.
I was going to say, I bet there are some moments when that's not a great place to be.
Exactly, and that turns out to happen quite a bit. So this myth never took hold in the maritime community, right? So it just took hold in the minds of...
Which is kind of funny because, I know a little bit... Look, Uncle Mark knows a little bit about sailors, okay? But
seamen.
But it is there are superstitions. It is a kind of a superstitious community.
Oh, for sure.
And and even cheekily they kind of play off some of those kind of folk traditions when they're sailing. You cross the international date line for the first time. There's that whole thing they do. So it's kind of funny that this just this never caught on.
Part of it might be the fact that were this some little tiny shoal or reef that could easily be avoided, then maybe it would have found its way into folklore, maritime folklore. If you go to Google Earth, you can't get around this thing, right? It's like when the Suez Canal was just blocked by that ship. Like, you have to go around Africa. To go around this triangle is about the same journey, right? It's just not something you can do.
It's also, not for nothing, it's a gorgeous place to sail and or fly over.
Oh, my God.
You want to do it. It's beautiful. I've done it a few times, and
all three of us have been through the Bermuda Triangle and are here to talk about it. So, yeah. However, and especially if you read the credulous writings of triangle proponents, the incidents that make up the basis of the legend are somewhat eerie. So let's get on to a few of the more famous ones.
Yes.
One of the first incidents attributed to the triangle was when in 1918, a naval cargo ship called the Cyclops went missing, along with all of its 309 souls aboard. It was the largest naval loss of life in peacetime up until that time.
Jesus.
So, leaving aside the fact that where the ship is thought to have sunk is not technically in the triangle, but it's close.
Don't get technical with me.
For a ship of that size to sink and leave no wreckage or no survivors is unusual.
Yeah.
But one hint came many years later when the Cyclops' two sister ships both broke apart and sank from the same structural failure that almost certainly the Cyclops had when it was transporting what turned out to be a giant load of some kind of magnesium ore. So that's probably what happened to that. The most famous incident of the entire Bermuda saga was the disappearance of Flight 19. If any of our listeners have any memory of the Bermuda Triangle, they will certainly remember this one. Flight 19 was a training mission consisting of 5 Avenger torpedo bombers that disappeared without a trace on December 5th, 1945.
That's spooky.
Yeah, the 5 planes and the 14 airmen took off from Fort Lauderdale and just never returned. Adding to the mystery, one of the planes searching for the flight crashed itself, killing all 13 crew members. However, it turns out that the reasons that the flight went missing in the first place and that no trace was found may be the same. Everyone was in the wrong place. From the last recorded transmissions from Flight 19, their captain, a guy named Charles Taylor, appears to have significantly miscalculated their position. Thinking they were in the Gulf of Mexico, with Florida to their east, they were actually over the Atlantic, with Florida to their west.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a big mistake. But remember, this is all pre-GPS. These guys were navigating visually, and clearly they mistook the islands they were flying over.
Yeah, that's where that old saying, a mistake as big as Florida, comes from.
Boy, I wish that was a phrase that we would say every time you go into the voting booth.
Yeah.
So
Goodbye,
anyway,
Florida listeners.
Oh, they know. They know what they've done.
They know. Out of desperation, after not seeing land for a while, this flight fatefully turned east, thinking they would just fly east until they saw Florida and then figure out where to land. And of course, in reality, this meant they simply turned and flew out over the Atlantic Ocean, out of radio range, until they ran out of gas.
But they didn't have enough gas to fly all the way around the world until they saw Florida again.
Not at the time.
They caught a glimpse of Spain before they went down.
Right.
Yeah.
The search was conducted in the Gulf of Mexico, where the flight was supposed to be, and by the time they figured out what might have actually happened, it was far too late. So even though this explanation for what really happened was part of the Navy's official report mere months after the loss, this was just too tempting an incident to let go, so Flight 19 has been one of, if not the most foundational myths of the Bermuda Triangle. So much so, if you guys remember, in Steven Spielberg's 1977 sci-fi classic Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the 5 Avengers of Flight 19 appear in the Atacama Desert for some reason, and at the end of the film, when the aliens are releasing humans they have been scooping up, the 14 airmen from Flight 19 are seen not having aged a day.
Right.
So, yeah.
There you go.
We'll come back to some pop culture references in a minute.
Oh, sweet.
A couple other notable incidents attributed to the Triangle were the disappearance, without a trace, of the Star Tiger and the Star Ariel. These were two, this was in 1948 and 1949 respectively. Both of these were small passenger aircraft. The Tiger was flying from the Azores to Bermuda, and the Ariel was flying from Bermuda to Jamaica. Although odd that these would disappear, remember this was before modern navigation, and both planes were operating at the very limits of their range. So the slightest error in navigation would mean they wouldn't reach their destination.
Yeah.
After both planes were lost, British South American Airways basically just changed their routing protocols, and no further planes were lost. So, and the only other one I'll mention, because there's too many, is the discovery of the Connemara 4. The ship was found adrift in 1955 with the crew missing.
Ew.
The ship had been adrift in the Atlantic while 3 hurricanes tossed it hither and yon, but crewless, it somehow survived the storms. Who or what could have taken the crew?
Well, yeah, Steven Spielberg. What about them?
It did nothing to quell the hysteria about the Triangle when the owner of the Connemara came forward to claim the ship, recounting that one of those hurricanes, Hurricane Janet, had dragged the already empty ship off its moorings and blew it out to sea.
Oh,
So it's just, yeah, nothing mysterious. There are myriad other incidents attributed to the Triangle, far too many to talk about here. But when you sort out the incidents that happened nowhere near the Triangle, and those that have either been heavily embellished, which many of them have, or have been made up out of whole cloth by some of the authors of these books, The number of mysterious incidents that have taken place in or very near the triangle are not in the least more numerous than any other swath of busy ocean in the world. So, and it must be restated that nearly all of the mysterious incidents one could generously attribute to the Bermuda Triangle have completely legitimate explanations. So that brings us all to the what. What do proponents of the triangle postulate is the cause of all these incidents? Well, the Bermuda Triangle could be called an ancestor of modern-day QAnon because all are welcome. There is not an idea too bizarre that someone has not tried to toss it into the triangle. So UFOs seem to be the most popular theory. Basically, aliens seem to be taking planes and boats to study our technology and biology. Another popular explanation is that the Bermuda Triangle is the location of the lost continent of Atlantis.
Of course.
Of course. And that disturbances from that lost civilization have caused compass failures and other navigational anomalies, leading to all of these instances.
Well, you got a ley line from there to Lemuria, and that's just going to make all the compasses go wacky.
Exactly. And I remember hearing that the whatever mysterious reason, if it's ley lines or some other thing, the reasons that airliners won't fly over pyramids is the same reason for the Bermuda Triangle, because it was, tons and tons of pyramids, because, ancient. So,
right. Yeah. Well, I mean, when I did ley lines, I talked about an image from above into the ocean in the Caribbean there.
Yeah, I remember that.
That looked vaguely like a pyramid underwater that everybody then decided was an ancient civilization or something like that.
Yep. So whatever the explanation, in the late 70s and early 80s, the Bermuda Triangle was everywhere in pop culture. The aforementioned Close Encounters makes several references to the triangle and the planes, boats, and people that have disappeared in it. The 1980 action flick The Final Countdown, starring Kirk Douglas and Martin Sheen, depicts an American aircraft carrier transported by a mysterious storm back to December 7th, 1941, near Hawaii, giving them the possibility of stopping Pearl Harbor. Although set in the Pacific, the plot makes more than one reference to the Bermuda Triangle, and that these time-bending storms may be the cause of the previous disappearances. There was I know, exactly right.
Everybody's willing to be off by many thousands of miles in this thing.
When you give yourself the margin of error that is basically 90% of the Earth.
Yeah.
Which is why I always thought that Amelia Earhart had gone down in the Bermuda Triangle, and then while you were talking, I looked her up, and she went down in the Pacific. So
in the Pacific, yeah. Well, they think.
Well, I didn't want to go down this road, but there are some authors of books about the Bermuda Triangle that stretch one of the lines all the way to Ireland and the other all the way to Africa. So basically, the Pacific Ocean,
The Atlantic.
The Atlantic Ocean, exactly.
Right.
So
See, here we go again.
Exactly. It's fungible. There was, of course, a 1975 film called Satan's Triangle, which opens with the following unattributed quote, "One of the most terrifying films ever made. Satan's Triangle haunted me for decades." That was written at the time of its release.
It's the movie. Okay. Well, that's proof that there's some kind of time anomaly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, who can forget Rene Cardona Jr.'s 1978 genre-defining classic, The Bermuda Triangle, starring John Huston. This film depicts solar rays, UFOs, compass failures, massive storms, impenetrable fogs, flocks of angry birds, earthquakes, super sharks, and why not, haunted dolls, as all part of the danger of the triangle. The film's tagline is, "Respect its secrets, don't provoke its wrath."
It's wrath. I love that it's a wrathful triangle.
Don't make fun of Happy Fun Ball.
Exactly. Another reference that's going to date us so hard. Fleetwood Mac and Barry Manilow both recorded songs titled The Bermuda Triangle, both terrible. There was a Milton Bradley board game and an Atari video game, both titled Bermuda Triangle. And both Wonder Woman and Scooby-Doo had episodes taking on the triangle. So yeah, it was kind of fucking everywhere. And then somewhere in the late 80s, it just kind of went away.
It disappeared mysteriously, like so many other things. It did. It's true. It was just ubiquitous. And then
I'll wager some of our younger listeners have never heard of it.
I asked.
Well, there you go. It disappeared into the Trinidad and Tobago octagon. Is what happened.
I asked a friend of mine who's probably about 30 now if he'd heard of it. And he's like, yeah, like planes crash there or something, like planes crash everywhere in the world. I'm like, yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, that's basically. So yeah, it occupied a disproportionate amount of my thought, and I think our nation's psyche in the late 70s, and now it's just gone.
Not only did I like know of it, but my sense of it as a kid was that this was just a known thing for like hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Like Columbus probably lost a ship there, and that was the first ship that was lost there.
Well, we didn't understand that people would go on TV and just lie to you. Right? Like that TV was
it
like...
It was a simpler time.
TV was like... you had to have some authority to be on television, right? There was a board of review that the government looked at. Well, there used to be. But now, we just couldn't understand it. It's like I've told you guys when I was a kid and found out that you could just buy trophies... I was so heartbroken because I thought there was like a government agency that examined the merit, right? And then they were issued like a gun to a soldier, right?
Yeah.
But we just didn't understand. Like you'd see a guy talking on Leonard Nimoy on In Search Of, and he'd be talking about the Bermuda Triangle, and you're like, well, Spock's not going to lie to me.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, and it's the upside is I think it's basically harmless. I don't know that people have died because of the Bermuda Triangle, the theory of the Bermuda Triangle. It certainly actually hasn't killed anyone, so...
I mean, people have crashed or sunk in it, just not because of it.
But, yeah, exactly. You draw if you take the Earth and draw any shape, any 400,000 square mile shape on any part of the globe...
Some shit's gone down in it.
Some shit's gone down in there.
Yeah, exactly. So is it? Are there still believers? Are there still like devotees?
I tried to kind of see how and why it went away like it did, and I really couldn't find. It just seemed to have fallen out of fashion. And there is not a lot of modern, current, a body of work about it right now. It seems it had its moment, and it is gone. Yeah, so there you go.
The Bermuda Triangle.
Just like a plane flying flying around in Bermuda, it's gone now.
That's right. So as long as what we always say here at the show, respect its secrets and don't incur its wrath.
That's right.
So, all right. Well, thanks, Doug.
Yep.
Tune in for Shape Talk again next week.